And welcome back to another hack tutorial from Stealth Data Zero. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create your own custom Python interpreter payload. Now, as promised, I showed you that we would start looking at shellcode, in particular Metasploit interpreter shellcode, and how to make your own FUD interpreter payloads. So we're going to start off with this because this is one of the most basic and easy methods, and it can also be applied to other payloads that I've showed you in the past, like my Python backdoor payload. But again, we're focusing on interpreter payloads and how to make interpreter payloads undetectable. So we're going to start out with a Python, move to exe, APKs, and all of that good stuff, and ways to manually make them better and code them better. So the first thing we're going to do is just start Metasploit. So we need to go over here, service PostgreSQL start, to start the Apache server, service PostgreSQL start to start the PostgreSQL service, and then MSF console to start Metasploit. And then of course we can just quickly load up our multi/handler, so use multi/handler. So if we hit ifconfig, we can see our internal IP address is 10.11.64.175. Yours might be under ETH0. Again, you would use your public IP address as lhost and port forwarding on 443 if you want to do this remotely, or you would use ngrok and use the ngrok tunnels host number to get the payload hosted remotely. So what we're going to do is just make a basic MSF Venom Python interpreter payload. So tag P Python /interpreter/reverse TCP. lhost is your internal IP address. lport is 443. We always use 443 because that's most likely to get you past firewalls, because it's open and we're using a reverse shell, and it's one of the few ways to get out of a really well protected corporate network. Again, public IP address here and port forwarding on 443 to do it remotely, or use a ngrok tunnel. So I'm going to go ahead and press enter and let that shellcode begin generating, and it's just a very simple script, and it doesn't take much time. So while that's doing that, we can set up our multi-handler, because we know our lhost is always going to be our internal IP address, which we found with ifconfig. We know the lport is going to be 443, and we know the payload is going to be the Python/interpreter/reverse TCP. Now, for the best results, use the reverse HTTPS, but I'm just going to show you how undetectable this payload actually is. And if you were to use the HTTPS payload, I'm sure you would get a completely 100% FUD. No antivirus is going to detect it. And also, again, this could be done with multiple types of scripts. So as you can see, this has been generated as test.py into our home folder, and what we want to do is just take that file and we're going to obfuscate it. So we're just going to go ahead and press LS, and this is manual obfuscation. So copy, and we're just going to cat that file out. Hit paste, and this is what the code looks like. So we can see this is all Python, readable Python, and then we can see we get to this point right here where it becomes base 64 encoding all the way up to here. So we take that base 64 encoding. Normally I would just take from here to here, because you can always add the exclamation or the equal signs, even though that's part of the coding. You can always add that yourself, and I'll show you what I mean. but you need to go to this website over here, which is www.base64encode.org. So what we're going to do is decode the base64 encoding, and this can actually show you how easily it can be to get caught, and that's why you always want to try to use encryption, because it will help the reverse engineering process take a lot more time, because it's not that hard to decode encoding. So we're going to paste the encoding here. So we have our base64 encoding, and we're just going to hit decode. And sorry if I'm moving kind of fast, because the video would be rather lengthy if not. So please just use the pause button, and also if you have any questions, just ask them in the comments. So as you can see down here, we have the code, and it's completely undecoded. So what we're going to do now is add comments with just random like binaries, like random ones and zeros, and random letters and numbers. Now make sure you do not mess up the indentations, because if you mess up the indentations, that will affect the code, and then it will no longer work. So if you're used to code, you know that the indentations are normally spaces or tabs. These are clearly tabs. So we're just going to place some more random junk code. And this is manual obfuscation, and you could do this with any interpreter script or Python script, And as you can see right here is the IP address that it calls back to, so that's how easy it would be to find that. But if you put it in between every single line, like some random code in between every single line, it will make it less and less and less and less and less detectable. Just make sure you have the hashtag in front of it so it's commented, because this is just junk code. But as you can see, we now have the junk code added, and I would add as much as possible. That way you can get your detection rating as low as possible. So we're going to take the code, and we're actually going to now re-encode it into base64. So we click the encode, and go ahead and paste that. And just click encode. And then once we scroll down, we will see our results. And right there's our base64 encoding. So what you want to do is just open up a text editor, your favorite text editor. Take the original code that you just catted out on your terminal. Open up a text editor and go ahead and paste that code. Then you want to erase all of the base64 encoding. Remember everything inside of those parentheses. If you're not sure about the equals, just delete everything and then just replace it. Okay, so now we can see in between the parentheses is only the equals. So now we can take our new code from the website, it only has one equal sign, so we'll change that. Just make sure that you keep aware of that, so no equals. And then hit paste, and it only has the one equal sign now, and you can see this is our new code and this is our new payload. So we're just going to save it as test.py, or test1.py. Now I've already done all of these steps to a payload called test.py right here, and I've already moved it to my Apache server. Now if you I named it FUD test, but this is just the same thing what I just showed you how to do. I'm going to delete, actually I'll leave that there, but this is the same thing that I showed you how to do. This FUD test. Okay, so add as much obfuscation, manual obfuscation as you can. As you've seen, I try to do each line. Take your time. It might seem boring, but it's definitely worth it with the results you get. So the payload that you have right now will bypass Windows Defender, no problem. But we're going for a payload that's either completely undetectable or has a rating of only 1 or 2 antiviruses, and paid antiviruses being able to pick it up. Now I have a computer, Windows 10 Pro, Casper key on it, which is very hard to bypass. It even blocks beef hooks, and Windows Defender on it as well, and we will be gaining an interpreter session on that device. But before we do, we're going to take this payload, the FUD test.py, and encrypt that payload. So I'll show you how to do that. We use a tool called Encrypt, and like I said, right now the payload you have is pretty powerful, but adding the encryption will stop reverse engineering, and it will not completely stop it, but slow it down or maybe stop it. And then also it will take its undetectable rating through the roof. So you need to name whatever file you want encrypted right here. It has to be a Python file. Check out the link in the description to see how to download this and install this. It's very, very easy. And then the output's going to be encrypted test.py. So we're going to go ahead and press enter. And then if we hit ls, you can see the encrypted test.py. And if we were to move this to our Apache server, which we have already done, which is in other locations, computer, var, www, and then HTML, you can see encrypted test.py. So before we go ahead and use this, I just want to show you guys, because the Python interpreter doesn't have a way that I could take a screenshot to show you that Casper key and Windows Defender are on. You just got to take my word for that. But I do have this virus scanner. It does not send out the images. So let's go ahead and scan the payload. This is the payload. I've already scanned it, and it's only got a 1 out of 6 detection rating. Casper key clean, AVG clean, Avis clean, all the big names clean, Big Finder, McAfee, all of them. The only one I was able to find it is this one. But I'll go ahead and do a new scan in front of you guys. So we're just going to go back. And again, this can be made into an exe file using py installer, or it will run on Macs, Linux, Unix right away as a Python file, or just use py installer on Linux or on Python or on Windows to make it a executable file. So we're going to go ahead and scan the file. It's checking the file. And this is one that's been made into an exe file, which kind of takes its undetectability down. But as you can see, 1 out of 6 detection rating again. If we go to the image results, we can see everything's clean. except for that same antivirus. So unless you're going against this antivirus, which is a paid antivirus, which I have rarely seen in the wild, you will get a Meterpreter shell. So 1 out of 26. So this is basically completely FUD. And again, if I would have spent more time adding random characters, even to the end of the code, like just make the code longer with random comments, and then in between each line do some random junk code, and you will probably get a 0 out of 26 detection rate. So let's go ahead, and since this is already in our Apache server, we already have our Apache server on. Let's go ahead and hit exploit. Go over to the victim machine that has Casper key and Windows Defender on already. Download encrypted test.py. Open it with Python. And as you can see, we are gaining a Meterpreter session. And if we go ahead and hit sysinfo, you can see that we're hacking a Windows 10 computer with the Python Windows Meterpreter. And if I go ahead and hit help, you can get all of your commands. Check out my post-exploitation videos to see all of the cool things, but you basically have full control over the device. You can turn off antivirus, upload any type of payload you want, but again, we're just using the tools Encrypt, and then we're just simply decoding the base64 encode, adding some junk code to it, as you can see here. Again, if you're adding junk code, try to add it through each line. Make sure your indentations are correct or the payload will not work. And then also you can add like even more junk code at the bottom if you'd like so. Not always the more the better, because you don't want to make the payload size too big. But this is without using the HTTPS payload, which would make it far less detectable. And you could also use a staged encoder, which I will leave in the description on how to use a staged encoder, and a video showing you how to set up a staged encoder. And obviously, if you don't know how to use the HTTPS payload, you just replace the HTTP or the TCP with HTTPS, and that will give you an encrypted shell. But as you can see, 1 out of 26 detection, absolutely great detection rating, and this is basically a FUD payload. And I'm sure if I worked on it a little bit longer and it wasn't just for a demo, it would actually be 0 out of 26 detection rating. So again, Casper key has been one of the hardest for me to bypass. I've heard AVG and Avis have been hard to bypass, but it shows up clean on all of these, so you won't have any worries about that. So this is how you would make a FUD Meterpreter payload. Again, we're going to get into generating shell code and different ways to use that shell code, like memory injection, and just looking at shell code and Meterpreter payload shell code in general. This is just the first video of many. This is just one of the basic ways to do it. We're going to do some memory injection, writing in C, compiling our own EXEs, all kinds of fun stuff. And remember, this could be made into an EXE using py installer, and you can even use the payload on its own to bypass Windows Defender just by decompiling the base64 code, adding some junk code, and then recompiling it and using it that way. If you encrypt it, then obviously you take the undetection rating much higher. Without it, it's like a 6. or a 7 or 8 with this. Obviously it's just 1, as you can see here. So hopefully you found the video informative. If you did, go ahead and drop a like, subscribe for more content, and as always, have fun, stay safe, keep hacking, peace out.